Everybody likes these simple narratives about the economy, but they're not always simple narratives. But here's one big clue. The sector that's known as
And on the Michael Medved Show, we talked just a moment about the economic news, which has generally been pretty good economic news so far today about the jobs growth, particularly in January. What does it all mean? Are we going to be reaching the astonishing golden growth that President Trump predicted yesterday and has been holding on to his prediction, growth of 15%? Nobody better to put that into perspective than Rick Newman, who is the founder of Pinpoint Press, a former senior columnist for Yahoo Finance, and chief business correspondent and Pentagon correspondent for U.S. News and World Report. And remember to get the benefit of interviews like this one. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, our flourishing YouTube channel, Michael Medved Official. Rick, your piece on today's jobs report is that we have a K-shaped economy and jobs too. All the growth is in healthcare, social services, and leisure hospitality. How are business services doing? Rick Newman.
not so great. I mean, we've had a net loss of jobs in business services. And in fact, out of 11 large sectors, things everybody's heard of, manufacturing, information, retail, things like that. Over the last 12 months, we've lost jobs in 6 out of those 11 sectors. And we had a good jobs report for January that the number was 130,000 new jobs. That's a good number, no doubt about it. But almost all of it, as you mentioned, was in healthcare and in social services, and there was a little bit of new hiring in construction, and that's about it. So when you see job gains that are just really narrowly focused on just a couple of industries, that tells you that we don't have a great labor market. And if you look at what's happening in consumer confidence surveys and what Americans say when they're asked about the economy, they've got two big concerns. One is elevated prices. That's nothing new, and and American workers are now very concerned about the labor market and job security, and that is new. And if you get deeper into the data does support that. We have a lot less job growth, and it's much more narrowly focused now than it was before President Trump came into office.
Okay, in terms of the job growth that is such a big concern, does a lot of the restrictions in job growth have to do with tariff policy?
I mean, it's hard to tell, but there are some signs. If you want to figure out why hiring has slowed down, you have to go through earnings calls and see what CEOs are saying. I mean, everybody likes these simple narratives about the economy, but they're not always simple narratives. But here's one big clue. The sector that's known as trade, utilities, and transportation has had a huge loss of, I think it's 190,000 jobs during the last 12 months. And guess why that might be? I mean, this is obviously very susceptible to Trump's tariffs. It's trade, transportation, and utilities. So stuff coming into ports and things related to that. And it makes total sense that hiring would be down there because Trump's tariffs. I mean, he has put new taxes on literally a couple $1 trillion worth of imports from almost every trading partner. That just makes stuff more expensive. When you make stuff more expensive, people buy less of it. So costs have risen for businesses in the United States and for consumers in the United States. And there's just a little bit of less economic activity around that. So that totally tracks with what you would expect to see from Trump's tariffs.
Well, the tariffs also do mean that in terms of inflation, which bothers many Americans, this also has an impact on the rate of inflation, doesn't it?
Sure. And inflation is elevated. Of course, inflation has been elevated since about 2022 when it peaked at 9%. And it came back down. Inflation is now about 2.7%. So that's not terrible. It's not 9% inflation. But the problem, as you know, any normal consumer will tell you, is that all the prices that went up stayed up. And we are not seeing anything really coming down in price. So we still have higher than average inflation of 2.7% on top of all the other inflation we had during the last few years. So there were some predictions last year, let's say 10 months ago, that Trump's tariffs, which looked pretty severe at the time, were really going to send inflation spiraling higher. And that did not exactly happen. And, we're trying to figure out all of this in real time, but a couple of things. There are a couple of reasons why inflation didn't go higher from the Trump tariffs. Number one is Trump backed off on some of the tariffs after he saw the stock market tank. So the tariffs weren't as they're not now as severe as they were at the beginning. Another one is that companies have figured out how to evade the tariffs. Another one is that Trump offers exemptions from the tariffs. And then the fourth explanation is that there's still inflation coming from these tariffs. So importing companies here in the United States have been very good at figuring out how to minimize the effect of those price increases, but they're still here, and some economists think they are still coming. So um, Americans are very concerned about affordability, and Trump has started talking about affordability. But one thing Trump has not done is make stuff more affordable by getting rid of those tariffs.
And speaking of making stuff more affordable, Trump says that's not important because the economy is going to grow at 15%. That's what he said to Larry Kudlow yesterday, I believe it was. It is being largely ridiculed. How often has the economy grown at 15% rate, as President Trump predicts?
I think it has happened twice. Now, I didn't go all the way back to 1789, even though Trump did say something like, "Well, in our early days, when I'm not even sure there's economic data from 1789 or 1790, but we did have a GDP growth close to 15%. I think 1 or 2 years during World War II. And the reason was it was just a completely exceptional time because of the war. That was all related to production of war material. Otherwise, I don't think you want 15% economic growth. I mean, that if you grow that much, something is wrong. And just to put this in context, he was talking about what the new Federal Reserve Chair, Kevin Warsh, assuming he does get confirmed by the Senate, he said, yeah, if Kevin Warsh does his job, I think he could get GDP growth to 15% or higher. So he just set an impossible bar for Kevin Warsh to clear. And what I want to see in prediction markets is how many days after Kevin Warsh takes the job will President Trump start to criticize him, much as the way he's been criticizing the current chair, Jerome Powell.
Well, that will be obviously an interesting drama as it unfolds. What a pleasure to have you with us. Thank you for the perspective.
Oh,
And
it's very
we
nice.
will
Thank you.
play some of those statements by President Trump about that 15% growth, statements that are being very largely ridiculed.